welcome to Out of the Box Radio with me, your host, Christine Blasdale. Out of the Box Radio is a weekly podcast of audible ear candy dedicated to bringing a fresh perspective on this thing that we call life. And each and every week, we're going to be diving into the topics that matter most with lively conversations on issues such as health, wellness, and transformational healing, all with the goal of creating a better world and becoming a happier human being. I will be your tour guide for this epic adventure, and each and every week we're going to be embarking on a journey with the ultimate goal being transformation to our highest potential. And now, let's get out of the box. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Out of the Box Radio. I am your host, Christine Blasdale, and I am very happy that you tuned in today because we have a very special program with an incredible guest. My guest today is an author, poet, songwriter, singer, self-taught acoustic guitarist, and an incredible survivor. Vennie Kocsis is the author of Cult Child, a memoir based on her life growing up a sexually, mentally, and physically abused child in Sam Fife's Move of God cult. She's here with us today to talk about her life, her experience in that cult, but more importantly, what she's doing now to help others who have experienced the same thing. Vennie, I want to welcome you to Out of the Box Radio. Wow. So I loved your book. I loved your book so much. To let our listeners have a little bit of an understanding, especially at the beginning, how young were you? Because you were very, very young at the time. But how young were you when your mother decided to join this cult? And for people who are not familiar with growing up in cults, if you can just talk about the dynamics of your family maybe prior to the arrival there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I was 3 years old when she actually left. However, the lady who recruited her worked on her since my birth. So the 3 years prior, she was the friend of, my father was in the Navy. And so they were all in the military together. So we were in California. My father was on the F-14 project. He was an engineer in the Navy and a propulsionary expert, and he helped design the F-14. So he would be gone for weeks at a time. And during that time, this woman definitely latched herself onto my mother and became deeper friends, inviting her to Bible classes, doing the typical love bombing, which they call evangelism, to get my mother's mind at least started on the route. I would say it took a good 2 years for her to really recruit my mother to the level that she was ready to leave my father. So life before the cult with my father, I have wonderful memories. He was a great dad. He was very close with his children. He took us to do a lot of things. We all have very clear memory of that. And ultimately, my mother did give him an ultimatum, and things began to change at the home. It was the 70s. There was a lot of communal housing going on, and my mother did that. She began to allow, these strangers and these church people to stay in our home, and my father was overwhelmed and didn't know what to do, and left the home, and it was funded by the Navy. So of course, as they went through the divorce, things changed, and we moved into a lower part of San Diego, and then eventually were told which commune that we were going to be sent to by the leader and his crew. So that's how old I was and how we got into the cult.
Now, this was all taking place originally in San Diego, correct? And you've said in the book as well that this particular cult, the Sam Fife's Move of God, mm-hmm. is still up and running, correct?
Absolutely. What they do is they break themselves up into sections. I mean, many churches do this. As soon as any controversy or they need to hide money or they need to do anything, they will dissect and then re-register themselves as nonprofits. So right now, the compound that I was on in Alaska still exists today. Some of the same people that I was on the compound with are still there. I believe there's 2 other compounds there that still exist, and then there's Whitestone, ran by a man named Bill Greer, which is quite popular, and they own businesses in Delta Junction. The interesting thing for me about Alaska specifically is that they began to build compounds there a couple of years before the Alaska dividends were about to hit. So that is when the state of Alaska decided they were going to pay their citizens some pipeline dividends because it was so profitable for them. So it was obviously very profitable for this cult to create multiple compounds there, send as many people as they could there, get them there a year prior so that they could establish their residency, so that they could then the next year file on their pipeline dividends, because any money that came in went to the cult.
That's was my next question. When your mother took you and your siblings, because it wasn't just you, right? When you came, now there is a moment in the book where you describe sort of all of your possessions, all of your belongings. Were they handed over to this cult, or did they take them, or how did that whole thing transpire?
Well, the process worked that anything that could be distributed, say linen, kitchen utensils, clothing that didn't fit you anymore. So anything that could be distributed went into something called the clothing bank, where people could go. The first I was on 2 compounds. The very first one was in the beginning. So from the ages of 3 to 7, I was in Massachusetts on what was called a Deliverance Farm. So they had about 3 or 4 Deliverance Farms because they believed in demon possession. And if there was any type of problem, say you were overweight, which my mother was, she had a demon of gluttony, she needed to go to a Deliverance Farm to help rid of that. So she had all of our belongings packed in a U-Haul. When we got there, it was gone through by the elders and the leaders, and whatever could be used was distributed, and the rest was burned. Pictures, anything that connected you see, to your secular life, because the belief was that you need to strip from that and strip yourself down to nothing so that you could then be remolded into the likeness of God, because that was God's purpose for your life.
Wow. So all of your, and as a child, I would say that this would, and you know what, and before we continue, I want to, I just want to remind our listeners, again, I'm speaking with Vennie Kocsis. She's a survivor of a cult, and she has a phenomenal book out called Cult Child. But Vennie, I want to talk about triggers, because I know that probably a lot of people who are listening to this, maybe they've suffered, if they were not in a cult, they've suffered childhood trauma, and that's what this is all about, childhood trauma. And I want this program to help people as much as possible. But I also realize that some of the things that we talk about are going to be triggers for people. So I know you're very cautious with how you speak as well, but I just want to caution people that when you listen to this, realize that this is Vennie's experience, and we're talking about this, even if you are triggered, we're talking about this so that it can be cleared, and hopefully that you can become empowered as Vennie has, because she is a powerhouse to be reckoned with. You are, girl. You are.
Thank you.
So that said, going back to that, the idea of a child who, when I was a kid, I very much connected to my toys, to my clothing, to photographs of me, at birthdays and memories of Christmas and all those things. All of those memories and photographs and things like that, they were burned.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God.
Yeah, so we only have probably me and my older brother and sister have maybe 5 pictures of ourselves.
Wow.
As children. What is in the book in the back is pretty much what we have. There's a few that I've saved for the sequel I'm writing now. But yeah, because you needed to disconnect from that and forget that life. That was the secular life, which, became evil as the mind control program, was enacted on us. So.
Wow. I can't imagine. That would be sort of almost the first trauma, or at least being relocated to a place where you didn't, your surroundings are completely different,
Yeah.
and you're under the control of other people at that
Mm-hmm.
point as a child.
Yes, and it's why I wrote the book the way I did, which, I've written it in first person from inside of my mind, because, of course I have huge memory gaps from especially those first 4 years. So the trauma level was extremely high, because the memories I do have are quite traumatic. So what I've forgotten is more traumatic. I don't recall and being separated from my mother. I don't know if I cried. I don't know if I was told, come on, let's go play. I don't know. I don't have any memory of that. I have very few memories of those first 4 years because of the level of trauma. I mean, there was truly some torture being done there, and it was an ex-military base that had been sold. So, just the tactics are quite questionable as far as how they were used, especially on the children.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, and as comfortable as you feel talking about that. What the trauma that was inflicted upon you, and it was all based on what? On purging the demons, whatever whatever excuse they wanted to give for that. But can you talk about perhaps maybe your earliest memory of something that happened to you that you're able to still recall at any level?
Sure. And I want to say that, I have talked about this a lot, so I am able to talk about it. I've had people say, how can you talk about that and not have emotion? I do have emotion about it. I've just learned to be able to relay it and not let that emotion control me. I would say, well, they did a lot of things like keep us in sleeplessness and sleep deprivation. So a typical day might have been, I may definitely recall getting up before the sun was up, at 4 and 5 to go and work in vast fields, because you had 100 to 200 people on a compound. So it's a lot of people to feed. So we were definitely child labored and kept in sleep deprivation, in the night, woken up to pray. One of my first recalls is a demon possession casting out session. I was a very clairvoyant child, and when I reconnected with my father, who went on, ironically, to work at Groom Lake for the rest of his life, he was able to, reveal a lot to me, that I had a sensory that was elevated. I was a very sensory child. I could see, and so things like that were considered demons. So I was often in that space, hands tied, a lot of face slapping, hair pulling, screaming, speaking in tongues. I left. My recall would be being in the corner of the room. I could see myself, and then I was gone into another dimension. So I write from that perspective in my book. Other things they did were to put us in ice baths and cold water.
Oh, yeah.
We were put into public humiliation, where if you spoke out of turn, you had to maybe sit at the meals where everybody else is around you eating, but your hands are folded. You can't have that meal. So we had our human rights taken from us, which is the right to have, 3 meals a day. And then the humiliation of that, you see, because everybody now sees that you got in trouble. Tape on your mouth, signs around your neck that, I am a liar, all kinds of things. And then to add on the sexual abuse that was going on there with the boys and the girls. So we were separated, you see. They took my mother. The interesting thing about this, is they encouraged her to get divorced because my father wouldn't join. But once she did, she became a scarred woman with like a scarlet letter, where now you're just a divorced woman. So, you're lower on the totem pole. Mm-hmm. So, we were separated into these classification units. So I was in a dormitory style room with girls my age. My sister was in one. My brother was in a house with boys his age. And then my mother was in this room with other fat women who needed to lose weight. So we were classified like that.
Wow. You were constantly being classified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, made to stand in lines. Every single part of our day was controlled and regimented. We were never allowed to play. I don't recall being schooled at that time. This is all in Massachusetts before I'm the age of 7. I have very little recall of that time. I have a lot of gaps.
I would venture to guess that you've had to, on your own as well, deal with the real. I mean, I think that children who experience what you have experienced would have a great deal of issue with their parent, feeling that their mother or their father, whoever it is, had abandoned them in many respects, like being angry at your parent for allowing this to happen to you when your parent is the one who's supposed to protect you.
Well, I went into traumatic amnesia for a while of my life, and definitely had Stockholm Syndrome toward my mother. But I was a very angry teenager, and I'm writing about that now. But I didn't really understand why I was angry. There's a hovering fog. I had already started to manifest some multiple personality disorder behavior, which back then would have been classified as schizophrenia. So there was never a conversation. You couldn't talk to my mother. She continued the narcissism that the cult created in her for the rest of her life. So she was a backhander, a yeller, a controller, very much a gossiper. She was just that type of mother. So yes, I was angry for a while, and then I became older and educated myself about mind control and realized that my mother was a victim as well. Mm. You know, they used her as well. They worked on her for 2 years, and I now. So
I feel like the whole idea is to shock the system, mm-hmm. to strip it, like you were saying, like with the possessions, to strip, you of being you, strip mm-hmm. your personality, your quirks, yes. your individuality, all of mm-hmm. that, in order to make you pliable to do whatever they want you to do.
No, but they did introduce discipline in a very slow way. An example would be that this woman who recruited my brother was left-handed. She told my mother, this is a demon spirit. It's not natural for a child to be left-handed. No. Yeah. You need to punish him. So my brother was punished a lot for writing with his left hand. Little tiny, very subtle things that introduce discipline, and it builds slowly over time. So it's not I meet you one day and 30 days later you're beating your children. It doesn't happen that quickly.
Right, it's a long grooming process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, and when you talk about the government not looking at it, mm-hmm. You had mentioned too before a little bit about that some of the tactics that they had about like the cold baths and the mm-hmm. sleep deprivation, which is very much a handbook out of something that the military Absolutely. Knows about. Talk about that aspect. Do you believe that this particular cult that you were raised in had connections to the military or to the government in some way because of the funding, and also because of the fact that nobody ever seemed to check up on you guys?
I absolutely do. I mean, I've done a lot of research, years of research, and I have a lot of factual information and documentation like land deeds. So I've been able to see who brokered the land deeds. Doug McClain is a great guy to Google because he's has CIA connections. His son's in prison in California for being a part of the Argyle scam. So these were the people brokering the land at the time. And the interesting part about where Delta Junction is it's right in the middle of lots of military installations, Fort Greely, HARP, all kinds of other training facilities. And they have a long history of testing. And when we were transferred to Alaska, we children were, I have memories of going to the military base, and so does my sister. So I did a lot of memory verification. Facts are super important to me. I have a bit of a journalistic mind, but there was even animal sacrifice in Massachusetts. So there's a couple of things going on here if we want to look at Project Paperclip and the use of the occult and energy that Hitler did, and the trading of the doctors through Project Paperclip between Russia and America, and bringing children who were specifically empathic. I know a couple of other children that I'm very close with, and they are very damaged and very fragile, and have the same memories. But we don't remember each other, you see. They have the same memories. I would say something like, hey, do you remember the Grove of Trees? Yes. What do you remember about it? And then I would let them tell me, because I don't want to influence people's memories. And if it matched, I knew this is real. This is something that really happened, where we were taken out, and I write about this in my book, to build altars. They were very Old Testament based, which to me is a mixture. When people talk about Satanism and Christianity, which to me is the same, because neither would exist without that book. But when you strip away the theology, the ritual is the same. The sacrificing of animals, the child watching the trauma of the animal just in itself is something that breaks you. To answer your other question too, I've noticed an interesting pattern. Children who went in, who were maybe 7, 8, 9, already into the age of critical thinking, sometimes seem to have leaned more towards having depression, a little tiny bit of psychotic traits, where those of us who were younger tend to be more agoraphobic, anxiety, isolators. So I do see a difference in how the effect happened depending on the age, of entrance. So there's been people sent to mental institutions. I've heard of one survivor who committed suicide, maybe not even one. Babies died on the Colton were buried. It was, just horrific things happening. And my brother had run away once in Alaska and got picked up by an Alaska state trooper, which really reminds me of what goes on in, say, Utah, where the law enforcement are also a part of the group. There's a state senator that goes to church at this group in Alaska right now. And my brother was trying to tell him, he was with his friend, please don't take us back. And they did. They took him back. And so there's a gross contradiction that very much mirrors MK Ultra, Monarch Project type programming of sexual grooming, and some flash memories of bright lights and surgical type rooms, but the rest of the memory hasn't been collected yet. But I'm working on that.
Wow. I just think that it's so important for the fact that you have come out and are talking about this, and the more people who hear your story, I think that maybe some things that have been suppressed, memories that have been suppressed from their childhood too, will come to surface, and hopefully they'll be able to take their lives back and heal. Do you belong to some sort of group? I know you had mentioned the Yahoo group. I don't feel necessarily comfortable telling people to search for that, because then they might experience what you experienced. But are there resources for people who have survived being in a cult, or just child trauma in general?
There's some great resources, especially for cults. And I do have to say that I find that, children specifically who grew up in cults, and specifically with the sexual abuse, have a little differing circumstances than children who grew up in secular society and were abused, because of our being sequestered. Like, I didn't have electricity, things like that. Cult101.com is a great resource to just understand cults. ICSA Home Org is a wonderful organization that's been around for about 40 years. I have a leaning towards Dr. Kathleen Mann. I mean, just following her page would give great information. There's some great resources out there for people who've left cults. But, you know, the problem is that when you leave a cult, you don't know what to do, where to go. There's nothing for you. You don't even know how to use the social services system.
Right.
And then on top of that, say you turn 18 and you're like, I'm out of here. So you leave. You've lost your family, all your friends. You literally are alone in the world. So does there exist a transitional program for people leaving cults that's affordable for them? The ones that do exist are quite expensive, which I find ridiculous, because when you leave a cult, you have nothing.
Nothing. You have nothing.
Nothing. So there is a bit of a racket in one part of the cult recovery program that I don't like, and I'm very outspoken about, and I'm not one who really cares who likes me or not.
You also don't even have a diploma, right? Because you have no formal schooling.
Well, we did have schooling, but it wasn't monitored. So for instance, an example would be, I didn't know about slavery in this country.
What?
And I'm writing about, yes, I hadn't a clue that it ever existed. So when we left and ended up in Tennessee, in a little tiny town that was completely segregated and racist, I was so, again, in culture shock. So they built their own curriculum, and the state is not monitoring that homeschooling system. They're not monitored at all. And so it's questionable. Why are they not being checked on? And, you know, why are they're a little bit more modern now. I had one girl tell me that she used to sneak on the internet and read my stuff, and that, you know, it gave her fuel, you know, and that's part of why I do what I do. I mean, there might be kids, like, I want people to Google Sam Fife and find my work. And I've had that happen. So they are more up to time and into technology, but a lot of the young people have to sneak even still today to try to gain access to the internet and be able to read what's really being said about what they're a part of.
You would think that when word would get out to authorities, so-called authorities in, excuse me, in the state of Alaska, or in any state in this country, that if word got out that there were children that were being not just physically abused, you know, through punishment or sleep deprivation or working, you know, like slaves on a farm, but the sexual abuse, and let's just call it what it is, rape, child rape. Because when I hear sexual abuse, it's almost like we've just kind of become numb to it, but it is literally the raping of children. You would think that someone would come and stop it, and it just seems so shocking to me that no one did. No one has. That's why I can understand the belief that there is a connection with government agencies or the CIA or whatever, you know, agent. Who knows how many agencies are involved with it? But somebody has to do something.
Well, there's a great nonprofit that's fairly new in Alaska called Move Forward Inc. And the gal who started it did so to try to start this education in Alaska. But I was in Alaska in 2014 with her. And it was interesting. We decided that we were going to try and talk with the FBI. The first difficulty we had was even finding where the FBI office was in Fairbanks, Alaska. It took us literally about an hour and a half to find it. We finally found it hidden in a little chiropractic office or some kind of medical office. So we weren't sure when we drove up, well, is this the right building? Like, this is a medical office. Okay, let's go in and ask. The person behind the glass counter said, yeah, just go right around the hallway. And that's no sign, nothing. So just a camera, you know, showing into the hallway. We knocked on the door, and an FBI officer came out with a notepad and was like, how can I help you? we sat in the hallway in the chair, and so I started talking first, and I said, there's a few communes, that we grew up in this cult. And the first thing he said to me was, now, wait a minute. First of all, let's be careful using the word cult.
What?
As soon as he said that, I looked at him and I said, you know what? I don't have anything else to say to you. Because if his mind is already that closed, there's no help for it. That means that they are either, they have to know. There's just no way. There's too much. The governor of Alaska has been out to this compound. There's a picture of John Squires, who runs the sawmill out there at what's called Dry Creek in Delta Junction. And that's the compound in Alaska I went to after Massachusetts. And his sister was one of my best friends there. And we had devised a great plan to run away when we were 18. But there's a picture of the governor there with him talking about, sustainable living and all of this, and, the horror upon which these compounds were built. They want to deny it. Fortunately, I have lots of documentation that doesn't allow them to do that. Like an article from the 70s showing, where Bill Greer was in trouble with the law for trying to exorcise demons out of a child in a high school in California. All of these things, and the history that they have, they're very protected, and that's a questionable, why isn't the state of Alaska going in and really tearing apart these compounds? Why aren't they tearing apart the FDLS compounds? It's the same thing. Why is Warren Jeffs or somebody like Tony Alamo allowed to continue to have contact with brides who were children when they married them? Why are they given special treatment? Why aren't they investigated? All of those are questionable things. So is it possible that it was a mind control program inside of a cult? I say absolutely possible. The connections are there.
Yeah, it's there is no other reason.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other reason, because it's been brought to their attention multiple times, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Not only by you, but by other people. And in your investigation, since your freedom from that horrific place, in your work looking at not just the cult that you were in, but on a grander scale, just for listeners to get an idea, are we talking about? We're not just talking about one or two cults within the United States, are we? We're talking about a vast network.
Yes. I've been contacted by people in South America. I was contacted by a gentleman in Africa who, Sam Fife's teachings, he knew Sam Fife. Sam Fife's teachings can be found on the internet, and I'd encourage someone who was curious about his doctrine, especially to read his doctrine in regards to children. Like, he would call the backside or the bottom the backside of learning. But right now that I know of, there's at least 3 to 4 compounds in Alaska. One of them was sold for a little over $1 million. There's one in Bowensville, Georgia, run by Buddy Cobb, who took over when Sam Fife passed away. Buddy Cobb is quite old now. There's an institution in Florida. There is what's called ISOT, which would be considered, it's In Search of Truth, so it's this acronym that they go by, which is a sister cult. They are in Canby, California, and they actually run a youth camp. At one time, the youth camp was run by the cult, but there were so many complaints of abuse that, as I understand the story, the state took it over with the same employees still working there. So
what?
Now it's just state funded.
Are you serious?
Yes. So now we're getting, and youth were also sent to our cult for reform. A really great book too to read that I've been reading and found so many similarities is Dead, Insane, or in Jail by Zach Bonney, who was in the 80s sent to a reform school. keeping us in church for 8-9 hours, having us speak in tongues for hours upon time, it brings your mind into this frenzy. So that's what they're doing to these people, and they have a lot of uses for them. They send them now out into the city to work. There's a business in Delta Junction called Jewels of Sheba. That product is brought in from a cult that they own in India. They make the product there, so they're using their labor to make money for the cult. In Alaska, they own Rika's Roadhouse, which is a restaurant. So they've incorporated business now into what they do. These reform schools are another example, but the same methodology is being used, where they bring the body and the mind into frenzies in different ways, whether it's shaking, dancing, speaking in tongues, chanting, anything that's going to program a repetitive frenzy into the mind. So yes, I'd say they're stronger than ever today, more financially grounded, intricately registered, all of that,
and protected,
Yes.
The children are not protected.
No.
The young people that are brought up there and literally abused and tortured, they're not protected. But the organizations, the elders, whatever they want, the grand poobahs that they are, they're protected.
And the sad part about it is, as the child grows into be a teenager, they are then trained to perpetrate the abuse. We were also trained, you never know who you could trust. So there's a deception. They might tell on me. So someone's always watching you. So there's that whole mind control of that going on as well.
That's the biggest component, I think, too, is the fact that your every move, every single thing that you do or say, what you're looking at, is all monitored, is all being watched by someone. So that would also shut somebody down, especially a child who's naturally curious with life, and expressive. So that must have been. I'm just.
And even the illusion. So even if you weren't being watched, but you believed that you could be being watched, that you could be told on, that I better be careful what I do. You're always as a child was I thinking, is this going to get me in trouble? Is somebody watching? And then there's severances of like running down the pathway to the cabin at night because, Sam Fife was very much a demonologist. They even welcomed pedophiles to the group because pedophilia was a demon spirit. So that's why so much sexual abuse was going on. You put pedophiles in that drew them. That's
of course.
A perfect setting for a pedophile, right? Nobody's watching. So your mind is constantly on a spin.
You're constantly on guard.
Yes, you never are. You forget how. Either you never learn, which I didn't because of my age when we went in. So I never learned critical thinking. Or your critical thinking is taken from you.
Oh, wow. Right now, I'm just getting such a huge heart blast.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm just tapping into all of these children, just like thousands of children.
Yes. It is, and it's not just in my cult. It's in everyday homes. I went to ICSA's conferences when they have them in the United States. I love to go. I met a girl who was a lifeguard at the hotel pool, and she overheard a conversation, and she said to me, you know what? That's how it's like in my house. She was 16. I said, what do you mean? She said, if I don't want to go to church, my dad takes my car from me. So she's being punished for not adhering to home beliefs. So there's cultish situations happening in everyday homes all over America, and children are the victims of that.
Oh, the amount of, and this is globally, the amount of trauma inflicted on children, on babies, is just astonishing to me. And and the thing is that what's so sick is that when a cult takes this idea of, oh, there's demons and we need to exorcise them out of you through whatever means they see fit that day, that gets them off, that gets them feeling good. The thing that is that the true demon, if there is such a thing, is the very thought that they can do this to another human being.
Yes.
And I want to know. Well, I just want to remind our listeners, if you're just tuning in, shame on you. Listen to the show from the beginning. It'll be available on archives. I'm speaking with Vennie Kocsis. She's the author of Cult Child, a phenomenal book. I really encourage you to get a hold of it. Vennie, let's cut to the chase here. Not only, what you've experienced, so many millions of people have experienced in their lifetime, be it if they were in a cult or if they were just in a horrific home situation with a parent that was abusive, physically, verbally, mentally, sexually as well. Mm-hmm. What can you tell our listeners who have experienced that? What has helped you become who you are today? Because you are such a bright, beautiful light, and I want you to share what you can with our listeners to let them know what you've been able to do. I know it's a long process, but maybe you can impart some wisdom to them.
It is a long process, and you do have to face your trauma, and that's the hardest part. There's a lot of crying and a lot of what I call tear letting, where it's just coming out and owning that, yes, that happened to me, but it doesn't have to dictate my behavior. I don't have to project my pain. There's days that I ache. I think about children every single day, not a day goes by that I don't feel deeply for children in this situation, not just in cults, but like you said, just being abused, period. So that definitely drives me to be strong, is that I have to continue telling my story, which helps me heal because I know that I'm helping other people. So I would just encourage people to own their place, stand in it, don't be ashamed. You're not mentally ill, your abusers are. Mm. So don't let anybody tell you, even a therapist, that you're mentally ill. We have special conditions because of what mentally ill people did to us. So that was very important for me to embrace that, no, I'm not crazy. I'm not mentally ill. I survived. So you guys survived. Know what your triggers are and what your grounding things are. For me, if I'm triggered, I try to drink some ice water. Or if I'm having a down day, I try to go take a walk in the woods. So it's knowing what is going to ground you. So that has helped me be strong. And then I do have a therapist, and I've had a therapist now for about 4 years. So it's helped me in the least have a definition for all of the people who live inside of me and why they're there and how we work together as a wheel, and given me stability and a way to express myself and say, hey, this is what I have, this is what I go through, this is my boundaries and what I need.
Oh yeah, and what you're doing now with the book, and even speaking to us today is so very important, because there's so many people that can relate to your story, mm-hmm. not to your specific story, and obviously the what you had gone through specifically, but in some way they can connect with that feeling of being a child and not being able to have control over your situation, over your life.
Absolutely, and I do connect with abuse survivors in general, because what I find is that when you take away, the circumstances around it, the effect is the same.
Oh yeah.
The depression, the anxiety, the agoraphobia, hypervigilance, startle responses, hypersensitivity. A lot of us are empaths. I know so many empaths that have suffered as children. One time, a shaman told me, sister, it takes a very, very, very strong spirit to come to this planet and suffer. That was
wow,
a real moment of clarity for me. It strengthened me. It was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm strong because I survived that. So we are strong because we're standing here today in spite of what they did to us.
You are very strong, Vennie.
Thank you.
You are. And I must say, too, that my experience as well is that those who have suffered the most, the gifts of empathy, but also telepathic powers, their intuition, their psychic abilities, have been just magnified to a point where the ones that I know of are actually now helping others. And it's such a beautiful thing to do out of something that could have broken anyone, It could have easily broken someone, and who would blame anyone for crumbling after that kind of experience? But so many are just taking their lives into such a positive place and helping others. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very healing. I definitely also do it for myself, it gives me a purpose, to know that there's people out there who need me. And I suppose I'll stop doing what I'm doing when I know for sure not another child on this planet will be starving, hurt, not have shelter or clothing, or being beaten or sexually molested. When I know that that's in place, then I can sit back and relax a little bit.
Oh, I adore you.
I know that's quite a grand scale, but I believe in the possibility,
You are one of my sheroes, Vennie Kocsis. We only have a few minutes left in the program, and I just wanted to sort of I like to give my guests the platform for a couple of minutes to just speak from whatever comes from your heart that you think that people and the universe needs to hear right now, and just express yourself in the way that you're feeling called to right now. And being an empath and being connected to source energy, I know that's something that will be quite easy for you to do. So I'll let you just take the floor for a couple minutes, and you can express whatever you wish.
Thank you. One thing that is really important, I think, right now is for people to turn away from fear. Anything that, including the news, groups that we may be a part of, and I'm not talking from an investigative standpoint, but more, survivorship, to not cycle into the fear. I noticed with some of these shooters, Kyle Odom would be an example. I've read his manifesto a few times. And one thing that I noticed is that he very much cycled into his fear. He became afraid of those he knew already were not good people. So we have to really listen to our intuition right now and not question it. There's an acceptance that comes in. And because we've grown up in two-dimensional thinking, which means that we have to have an answer for every question, it's very hard to move into another dimensional thinking where you don't have to have the answer. If I don't feel good about someone, I don't need to know why. I just know I don't feel good about them. And that's all I need to know. So if something makes me feel like I don't feel good about it, I set it aside and I focus on the things that make me feel good, standing in my place, being quiet, not having to get involved too much into things that don't concern my specific mission, because I will try to advocate for everything and spread myself too thin. So focusing inward has been very important. I'm also completely revamping my website, which I'm super excited about.
Oh, give that website address out.
Beautiful. It's VennieKocsis.com. So what you see now will change in about 30 days. I'm working on that. It'll be completely different. And we'll also have some FAQ for those who do want to have just basic information and resources on cults. I'm going to provide that, some links to some of the websites I gave earlier. Wonderful. So that people can become more educated, because the word cult is derived from Latin, and it simply means to worship. So one could say on a generalized level that if we worship anything outside of our own empowerment, that we are falling into a cultish mindset.
Bingo.
So, being an individual and knowing that you don't have to search outside of yourself for power, it is already inside of us. We just have to let it wake up, is important. And then another thing that I am planning on doing is a book tour next year. So that will be on the new website, and I'm going to be logistically mapping it out. And so follow me on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Vennie Kocsis. So I'm on Google as Vennie Kocsis. You can find my Instagram and Twitter and everything if you just put that name in there. So I've got some exciting things coming. I have a sequel that's going to be launching along with that book tour called Rise of Scylla. So everybody will see where I went after I left the cult, which was quite a wild ride. It'll be a little bit of laughter and, take you on another emotional roller coaster ride, but to really see the aftermath. So I would just mostly encourage people just to don't fall into fear. Don't let them have that part of you. Don't feed it.
I love it.
Yeah.
And for folks who are interested in checking out Vennie's website, it's Vennie Kocsis. It's spelled VennieKocsis.com. So again, it's VennieKocsis.com. So you can check out all of her work. There's links to the book there, I believe, as well, so people can get a hold of the book, Cult Child. And Vennie, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for coming into my life. Now I know a very special person that will be in my life for a long time, and I want to have you back if possible.
I would love to.
Would you like to come back on the show?
Heck yes, I would love to.
You're so cute.
We always
Heck
go
yes.
by so fast, right? You're like, it's already over. Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I just appreciate you giving me a platform for my voice.
Well, and we can dive into a lot of other discussions and
yes.
And just, there's so many things that we can talk about, and I know our listeners, I know that the Out of the Box listeners would love to hear more from you, so we'll definitely do that, all right?
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, that sounds great.
So I just want to thank you so much. Again, Vennie Kocsis has been my guest this hour. She is the author of Cult Child. Get the book. Go check out her website at VennieKocsis.com. Also, if you've missed any part of this interview, don't fret. You can listen to the archives. You can actually never miss an episode of Out of the Box Radio. You can go and download if you have the app iTunes or iHeartRadio, you can subscribe to Out of the Box Radio with Christine. Subscribe, and you will never, ever miss an episode. Also, we like to post all of our shows on YouTube, so you can check out the YouTube link for this show. And the beautiful thing about the YouTube link is that you can share that easily with friends and family. So if you know of someone who has the same experience or is experiencing something that we cover in a program, you can send them that link in an email. You can share it on your social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and then more and more people will listen to the program and gain the benefits and insight from folks just like Vennie and many others. So I want to encourage that. And I want to, again, thank you so much for your time today and listening to the program. Until next week, I want to remind you always to think outside of the box. And I'm Christine Blosdale. Bye for now. Hello, everyone. It's Christine from Out of the Box Radio, and I wanted to tell you about a really, really fantastic new venture that we're taking on here at Out of the Box Radio. It's a very special, very unique travel club. It's one way we can get our listeners out into the world and experiencing some of the most beautiful destinations anywhere on the planet. And I want to introduce to you someone very, very special to me, travel consultant Lisa Koppelman. Now let's talk about one of the very first travel packages that we're going to be promoting here on Out of the Box Radio, a place that is near and dear to my heart, one of the most gorgeous spots, like I said, on this planet, Costa Rica. Now, there is a trip that's being planned for Costa Rica in November, correct?
Correct. I am actually taking a group to Costa Rica. We will be leaving on our tour November 15th. So I'm recommending that guests actually travel in on the 14th so they can meet with their tour. We're going to travel to 4 different destinations. We will start off on a ground transfer to Arenal, home of the Arenal volcano. It's an absolutely gorgeous destination, nothing like it. There's nothing like waking up, pulling your curtains, and seeing a volcano right outside your window.
Wow. And then?
We will spend a few days with a volcano hike. We're going to do a tour of ecothermales, which is a hot springs, thermal pools. Have dinner there.
So now also on this trip, there's horseback riding to the Fortuna waterfalls?
Correct. Right. And we're going to have a couple options. So if people don't want to ride a horse, but they want to zip line, they can do that. So different options for different people. We will be doing the La Fortuna waterfall. We're going to do the Arenal volcano hike. We'll do the thermal pools. We actually visit an indigenous village on that horseback ride and get to swim in the waterfalls.
You're also going to one of my favorite destinations in Costa Rica, Manuel Antonio.
Yes.
It's gorgeous. Oh my God.
Most beautiful.
Now, what are they going to do in Manuel Antonio?
Well, right after we leave Arenal, we're actually going to do a boat crossing of Lake Arenal and go to Monteverde, which is the cloud forest. We will have a wonderful dinner at one of the restaurants there. We're going to do a Don Juan coffee and chocolate tour and actually listen to frogs that night as we doze off. Next morning, we're going to head down to Manuel Antonio, and we'll travel along the Pacific coast, and the views are spectacular. We'll stop along the way. And when we get to Manuel Antonio, we're going to settle in, and then we have planned there also a horseback ride. We're going to go to Santa Juana, which is an indigenous village that's been revived up in the mountains with views to the Pacific. We've got a waterfall tour there and a waterfall swim. We will do a catamaran tour with snorkeling off of Manuel Antonio National Park.
It's so beautiful there.
Also going to do the Manuel Antonio National Park hike. So
gorgeous,
that's
gorgeous.
Going to be amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolute pristine, beautiful land that Costa Rica is, and the water, the ocean there is just absolutely gorgeous. I will put this on my list of one of my favorite places in the world to visit. Costa Rica gave me my life back. Every single time I leave, I cry. I cry because I miss it, and I know I'm going to miss it, but I really encourage people to go on this trip. This is, again, it's November 15th, but you want people to fly in on the 14th, and it'll be departure on Wednesday, November 23rd. So it's really November 14th to departure on November 23rd. And if people want to get onto this incredible, incredible tour and travel package, how are they going to get in touch with you?
Just send me an email. It's lisa@accentontravel.net, and I'll give you a call back and we'll talk about your plans.
And also, we want to remind people that travel insurance is recommended.
Always.
Make sure that you have a current passport, and please do contact Lisa as soon as possible, because also there's limited space on this particular package, correct?
Absolutely correct. It's a small group, so you want to be in early and let us know, that you want to travel, because, only so many people can go. Please mention Out of the Box Radio, and with a $400 deposit, you can be on your way to Costa Rica, and this is the happiest place in the world. This is what the Costa Rican people are deemed as the happiest place in the world.
And remember, also for that special package, you definitely want to mention that you heard about this. You want to get the deal, the Pura Vida Costa Rica package from Out of the Box Radio. Contact Lisa at accentontravel.net.